Alright, y'all, welcome back. This is going to be Unit 3, Day 2. Some reminders before we get started. Please make sure you have a history notebook out and you're taking notes as you move through the video. And make sure that you complete the vocabulary for this video, which will be on the next slide and down in the description as always. So let's go ahead and get started for today. So, our key terms for today are going to be the Second Industrial Revolution, the Bessemer Process, Eli Whitney, Henry Ford, vertical integration, horizontal integration, Bessemer Process, Saboteurs, and Luddites. So today we're primarily going to be focused on the Second Industrial Revolution and the causes and effects of the Second Industrial Revolution. So before we dive into the kind of nitty-gritty of the Second Industrial Revolution, let's go ahead and talk about some migrations that lead to kind of some of these kind of population explosions, population booms that allow for the Industrial Revolution to take place. Some big reasons for migration. Of course, you may have learned in your previous classes about push and pull factors. A push factor is a reason why people leave a country, and a pull factor is a reason why people come to another country. So, for our biggest example of this, let's look at the Irish moving to America. In the late 1700s, early 1800s, and even through in Ireland there's a potato famine where people begin to starve to death because they can't produce food. So many Irish leave and come to America because America has food and jobs and the American dream, right? Now there's also going to be other groups of people that move through. We have Japanese agricultural workers moving from Japan to the West Coast and even into Brazil and Argentina. We have Chinese immigrants working on the West Coast of America. These are going to be working on, the railroad. And again, those are kind of fleeing kind of this monarchical dictator feudal systems that are in Japan and China from our last unit, and they're coming to America to kind of work and be free, and for the lack of a better term. And of course, well, there's also some interesting exceptions to just the moving and staying. In Southern and Eastern Europe, and some of these Europeans in Russia and Italy and Greece, what they do is they work in Europe in some seasons, and then they move to Brazil and Argentina to work in agriculture for part of the year. So they're constantly going back and forth. And this is where you're going to get a lot of Italians that are moving to and fro Europe and South America, and this is really going to be for the reason of Pope Francis during this time, who's going to kind of really push for that. So let's talk about the factory system. So the factory system is kind of the staple of the Second Industrial Revolution, which the Second Industrial Revolution occurs in the 19th century. It's going to be engine-based, steam engines, and it's going to rely on factories. Now, of course, you have in 1856, you have the Bessemer Process, the Bessemer Converter, which is going to make creating steel cheaper, and it's going to make it stronger. And of course, well, you have the factory, and the factory is this insane, factory that builds and produces mass production, and it gradually replaces the putting out system. If you remember from our last day, the putting out system was, you have 4 or 5 people in a small building. Maybe it runs off water, maybe it doesn't, and they kind of produce whatever it is kind of slowly. Well, the factories are bigger, they're faster, they're more efficient, and, well, they require a division of labor. Well, what is a division of labor? Well, division of labor is, it's extremely low skill. You're going to just make X amount of money, and your job, if you work in the factory, your job is to put on wheels. If I'm working in a car factory. If I'm working in the car factory, my job is to put on wheels. Do I worry about the engine? Do I worry about the doors? Do I worry about anything else? Nope, my job is to put on the wheel. That's it. That's division of labor. You got one guy to do the wheel, you got one guy to do the door, you got one guy to do the engine, you got one guy to do everything, or one child, one woman, whatever. They do one thing at a time. They're not creating the entire process by themselves. Now, well, Mr. Leveridge, that sounds easy. Like, why is that an issue? Like, okay, I can put a wheel on a car all day. Like, that doesn't seem very hard. It's not, but at the same time, uh, since it's not hard, you lose your social status. You're not a, you're that's not skilled labor. That's you're just you earn wage, right? Also, you mess up, you don't put 1,000 wheels on 1,000 cars in a day. You lose half your pay a day, or whatever the number is, right? Work discipline is hard. If you try to, you know, unionize or do anything like that, you're fired. Or guess what? We're just cutting your wages. You know, it's also extremely fast paced, right? And it's extremely frequent accidents. Oh no, I'm working with molten metal to make a car door. Oh, I burned my hand off. Well, you're fired. There's no workers' comp, nothing. Game over. Right? Well, this leads to people not being super excited about it, and this leads to, you know, two groups of people. We have saboteurs. Um, these are Flemish workers who throw their wooden clogs or shoes in the machines and break it. Because if the machine is broken, that's not your fault. I was just doing my job, boss. The machine broke. You can't fire me because your machine's garbage. Well, there's no arguing with that. So that's where we get saboteurs. That's where we get the term sabotage from. Of course, then we have Luddites in England. And they're going to... Luddite means you're anti-technology. And they're going to destroy mills and factories and between 1811 and 1816. And they're just very anti-technology. So let's talk about the spread of industrialization. The first industrial revolution was largely Atlantic-based between 1750 and 1850. This is going to be the putting out system. This is going to be the British industrial monopoly. By the mid 1800s, Belgium, France, and the United States began to move toward industrialization. In the 1800s as well, Germany, or what will become Germany, is going to sponsor heavy industry, arms, and shipping. And of course, the United States is going to have a cotton and textiles revolution. And the Civil War in the mid 1800s is also going to lead to explosion of production in the United States, which becomes extremely important. Now, this is a map showing the biggest kind of areas of industrialization. If you notice, they're really built up around cities and on close to either rivers, canals, or the ocean. So let's talk about industrial capitalism. Now, capitalism is a kind of free market system where the government has little to no control over your production. Well, how do we get to that point? Well, mass production, of course, makes things cheaper. Well, how do you get to make things faster? Because if it takes a long time to make it, it's going to be expensive. But if I can produce the same thing in a minute, I can sell it for cheaper. Well, it's going to start with Eli Whitney. Eli Whitney is going to start the mass production of interchangeable parts for firearms. What is interchangeable parts? Well, that means if I have a screw that goes into a gun to make it work, I can take that screw and stick it into any other gun and make it work. Right? The same thing works with like cars or your iPhones or your Androids or whatever, right? They're going to have a set way to make it with the same number of materials and same materials in every one. So I take a screw out of one iPhone and I could put that in another iPhone and it works just the same. It's interchangeable parts. Right? Eli Whitney is also going to produce the cotton gin, which is going to make cotton harvesting cheaper and increase production, which is going to increase the slavery, which that's a whole nother issue, right? Of course, next we have Henry Ford. He's going to introduce the assembly line, which is applied to automobile production. This is going to be where I am the tire guy, and I take the tire, I put it on a car, it moves down. I take the tire, I put it on the next car, it moves down. Or I take this bolt, I put it in this hole, and the next guy puts the nut on, right? Either way, it's going to make it faster, right? Now, we also have structural changes in industry during this time. This is going to be large-scale corporations with plenty of investors, right? And it's going to, you know, this is going to increase the amount of industry in an area. We want to monopolies, trust, and cartels. To understand what a monopoly is, right? In trust and cartels, there's two ways to look at it. You have vertical organizations known as monopolies. And what a monopoly is when one company controls all the aspects of production within an industry. If we look at, say, McDonald's, if McDonald's was a vertical organization, they would control all the land, the wheat to make the buns, the fields to produce all the vegetables, and the cows to make the meat, and they don't have to buy it from anybody. Right? They have everything. They control every aspect goes into making your Big Mac or whatever, right? So that's what a vertical monopoly is. They control every part of production, right? And there's no buying, there's no middleman. A biggest example of this is going to be Rockefeller Standard Oil Company, or what is modern day Exxon. They controlled the land, they controlled the oil drills, everything, and they just had this vertical control. Now, horizontal organization, this is going to be trusted cartels. If you go back to our McDonald's example, if it was a horizontal organization, that means there's no competition. So if, say, Wendy's builds in an area, McDonald's is going to buy that Wendy's, and now it's McDonald's. Oh, Whataburger's across the street, they're going to buy that Whataburger, right? And that's not McDonald's, right? That's complete, right? They have horizontal control. There's no competition. We'll get into in class of why that's a bad thing. So let's talk about the generalized effects of the Industrial Revolution. Well, they can make more food, they can make things easier, so this is going to increase population. They can't all live out in the countryside, so this leads to increased urbanization, right? Also, people who are not in industrialized areas, who don't have access to factories and don't have access to things, are going to want to move where those jobs and money is. So this leads to immigration, migration, where they're moving to these countries, moving to these places that have jobs, that have money, that have, means of production. Well, now we have people who are working in these factories, right? I'm a business owner. I own 5 factories, right? And I can pay them pennies on the dollar and make millions of dollars in the process. This is going to increase wealth, not only for the top, but for the middle and lower. Now you have a business middle class, right, who they have some skilled labor, right, but they're not like the best at skilled labor. They're not super educated, but they're not like, uneducated. And of course you have the working poor, where they can survive. They're not like starving to death, right, but they're not quite middle class, and they're definitely not upper class. So this increases wealth across the board. Due to mass production, this leads to consumerism, meaning that, hey, I don't have to fix my car. I just go buy a new one. Or I'm going to fix my whatever. I just go buy another one, right? That's how we are today. Oh, my phone broke, right? Oh, I'm not going to go get it fixed. I'll just go buy a new phone, right? It's consumerism. Now, this also changes the role of women. Women now are not just homemakers. They're not just stay at the home taking care of kids. Women work in factories. Women work at restaurants. They work at every aspect of it. They're now bringing in income into the household. The poor now have more access to jobs, whether they take it or not. Minorities, we'll get into what happens to slaves here in a minute, and other minorities, right? But, they now have more access, right? It's not just a white-controlled population, right? There's more minorities from Asia and South America and Africa and other parts of Europe, where they now actually have opportunities to work in a factory. Now, this also comes in the change of child rearing in childhood. This time you'll see the first introduction of like kindergarten, and you'll also see that, hey, kids are working in the factories, kids are working in mines, kids are, dying by the droves, right? Kids are still working in farms, right? But, now they're working in mines and factories, and the kids really don't get a childhood for a while, because you're 10, go work in a factory. Right? You need to bring home. We're starving. You need to earn your keep. Go work in a factory. Right? By the end of this unit, we'll see an increase in leisure time and common culture. But for right now, it's still just go work in the factory. Right? Why are you doing anything? You need to go work. There's also going to be a demand for social reform and workers' rights, where you set, how long somebody can work a week, and, changes in how people are treated and other things. Now, with this, due to access and increase in easy access to getting things, this increases lifespan, the standard of living increases, and after a while, it's actually going to decrease the death rate. At the start of the second industrial revolution, it's not going to decrease the death rate. It's really not. But by the end, it really does. Also, by the 1900s, the end of, or near the end of this industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution, you're going to have the emancipation, where most of the big countries have totally banned slavery, and they've emancipated all slaves and serfs. But slavery never goes away. We still have it today. Now we have environmental degradation, right? We have coal factories, coal's burning, right? It's going to destroy the environment. Right at the start, we don't really care, but by the 20th century, we're like, oh, this is a problem, right? And it's still a problem today. So, for our last bit, these are the characteristics, kind of a compare and contrast, or comparing the two first and second industrial revolution, right? Most of them are pretty similar. You need to look at, this needs to be in your notes, right? Now there's one thing on here that you need to know is the Ford system. That's going to be the assembly line, where you have one guy who does one thing, or one woman who does one thing, and that's what they do. It's assembly line working. Alright, y'all, so thank y'all. This is going to be it for today. Make sure you complete the notes. Make sure you did that chart at the very end. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll see you guys in class. Thank you.